Innocent people, but of culturally significant works of art as well. It all started with one man's rise to power and his obsession with racial purity. This man was Adolf Hitler. Hitler from an early age became obsessed with the idea of German nationalism, which was his biggest motivator in life. Along with the strong desire to be in power, Hitler was very fond of German art and even chose to take up the craft himself. Hitler applied to the Academy of Fine Arts twice and was rejected both times. Shortly after this, he really started to express his feelings of anti-Semitism. Hitler later joined the German army and in 1923 was arrested and tried for high treason. During this time, Hitler wrote an autobiography full of propaganda and falsifications. The book mainly discusses Hitler's plans for turning the German society into one focused on race, expressing anti-Semitic and pro-Aryan views. Hitler's novel aided in his rise to power, despite the fact it was disruptive and vexing. Hitler made a big step in his rise to power in 1932, when he became chancellor and formed a de facto legal dictatorship along with an implementation of the Enabling Act, which gave his cabinet full legislative power for a time of 4 years and allowed for deviations from the Constitution. Once Hitler and his cabinet obtained full power, they continued their systematic suppression of other political parties. In 1933, Hitler achieved one of his goals, that being the Nazi Party was the only legal political party in Germany. Due to the fact Hitler strongly believed in Aryan supremacy, once he obtained power, he began implementing a number of laws to slowly exterminate the Jewish population. These laws allowed the Nazis to boycott Jewish businesses, later followed by a law which excluded Jews from state services. Eventually, Jewish people were forced to become segregated from German society. Anything considered un-German by Hitler and his followers was deemed illegal, which led to Kristallnacht, or Night of Broken Glass. This event was the obliteration of Jewish businesses, synagogues, schools, and homes. Hitler and the Nazi Party believed Jewish people were an evil race and essentially dehumanized them. The Nazis invaded Jewish homes, took anything they were fond of, and would then arrest or eliminate the true owner of the home and its belongings. The Nazi Party was able to do this legally because of the laws Hitler had put in place. Unknown to many, the Nazi Party had a strong inclination for stealing significant artistic and cultural objects. From 1933 to 1939, countless pieces of art were stolen, hidden, and destroyed. Of the known works, the value of all the artwork is estimated to be $20.5 billion in current value. One of those stolen pieces of art is the portrait of Wally by Egon Schiele, a painting created in 1912 depicting Schiele's proclaimed mistress. The painting is very soft and less graphic than many of his other works. This work is iconic in the art history world because of its involvement in Nazi loot and a 13-year legal battle to return the piece to its rightful owner. The painting was purchased many years before World War II by a Jewish art collector, Leah Bondi. She owned and ran the Werthel and Sohn Gallery. Not far into World War II, Nazi art dealer Friedrich Welz Aryanized Bondi's gallery, and in addition to the seizure of all works in her gallery, he forced her to give up a prized personal possession, that being the portrait of Wally. The painting's whereabouts during the war aren't entirely known, but was found after the war in Heinrich Reiger's art collection, a fellow Jewish art dealer who had passed in a concentration camp. It was pointed out that the portrait of Wally was clearly not a part of Reiger's collection. The painting had been confused with Schiele's portrait of his wife, which was a drawing. Portrait of Wally is oil on wood. According to Nick O'Donnell, no curator would mistake two works for each other. The painting then found its way in the Austrian National Gallery. The painting was purchased along with other works by Schiele to be a part of a Schiele collection at the gallery. Once Leah Bondi was able to speak out and attempt to reclaim rightful ownership of the work, she did. Bondi tried for years to prove the work was hers, but continued to encounter legal complications. After many failed attempts to retrieve the work, Bondi reached out to fellow Schiele collector, Rudolf Leopold. Expecting help in getting the work back due to the power he held in the artwork, Leopold instead lied to her about where the painting was located, and a year after talking with her, went to the museum and purchased the painting for his own collection. Leah Bondi declined to file a suit in Austria, stating, "It is probably very hard to have lawsuits in Vienna against a medical doctor residing in Vienna, because the judges always take the side of the resident in Vienna, and if the lawsuit is lost, I have lost my picture forever." In 1997, the Leopold Museum loaned the work to the Museum of Modern Art. An art dealer revealed to a reporter the painting was victim to Nazi loot. This was the start of a legal battle that had lasted for longer than a decade and shook the art world, leaving a lasting effect on how restitution cases would later be handled. Leah Bondi had spent all of her post-World War II life trying to get back her beloved painting and had passed before the legal battle even began. After word was out the painting was Nazi art loot, a subpoena was issued, and thus the case began. Because of the controversy of the legality of the work, many well-known people and museums involved in the art world found themselves tied up in the complex legal battle. A majority opposed the subpoena publicly, and many responded to word of the case. Leopold himself actually responded to the news of the case, stating, "They're looking for a way to tighten the laws, and on the other hand, there's greed." Which I feel is ironic considering the fact he refused to help Leah Bondi when she desperately was trying to reclaim the prized painting that she was the rightful owner of. The case awakened those in the global art community to the huge issue of Nazi-looted art. When Austria heard of the revelations, they passed a new restitution law, all due to the uproar that Wally brought. At first, the subpoena issued had failed in the New York State Court, but U.S. Customs Service brought the case to the federal level and seized the portrait as stolen property that had been imported in violation of federal law. The U.S. was able to do this since the painting was loaned, and MoMA did not get IFSA immunity first. IFSA is the Immunity from Seizure Act, which states a painting immune from seizure can't be seized by the government. In this case, IFSA doesn't apply. The United States government then immediately declared they would do everything in their power to retrieve the painting on behalf of the heirs of Leah Bondi. Feinstein Herrick was the individual who represented the estate of Leah Bondi-Jarret throughout the litigation. Herrick worked closely with the U.S. government to gather all the information they needed to get Wally back to its rightful owner. The United States claimed the painting was stolen and was in violation of the National Stolen Property Act. After this, the Leopold Museum dismissed the claim that the painting was stolen and proceeded to make multiple arguments. Both the Leopold Museum and the Museum of Modern Art dismissed the complaint more than once, which the court denied. Many arguments were made by both museums, and the U.S. rejected most of them, considering a majority of the claims were not applicable in the Portrait of Wally case. After more than 12 years into the case, a date for the trial was set. There was only a small chance of the case being avoided, but due to Leopold's untimely death, it was. Leopold's death allowed for a resolution to be reached. The U.S. attorney announced a settlement, which was for the Leopold Foundation to pay the Bondi heirs $19 million, and if they agreed, the painting could return and remain in Vienna at the Leopold. The Portrait of Wally case laid a foundation for how restitution cases would be handled in the future. This case was only the third restitution case to be filed since 1990 and caused serious uproar in the art world, forcing people to look at the realities of Nazi-looted art. While there are clearly many legal aspects to this case, causing it to last 13 years, the emotional and personal significance this painting holds needs to be comprehended. This case was significant because it allowed individuals to open their eyes and recognize the atrocities of Nazi loot and the legal battles it had brought. This issue went unspoken for many years after World War II, and the Portrait of Wally case allowed it to be brought to light again. The Nazis were relentless when it came to their attempts to get rid of anything remotely Jewish. What needs to be understood is that all of these significant pieces of artwork stolen by Nazis held some type of personal value for their rightful owners. Their families, culture, and history was being destroyed by those who felt they were a superior race. Jewish people were essentially eliminated in German society and had everything taken from them, which today makes it extremely difficult for them to try and obtain ownership of their belongings again. I think what some people fail to acknowledge when it comes to returning these great works of art to their rightful owners is that it's not about the money or reclaiming it on account of how famous the work is. Many museums and individuals in possession of Nazi-looted art fail to put their pride aside because a painting is very valuable or well known, and they don't want to lose that. Individuals who fell victim to Nazi loot lost all they had, including themselves and their history. One way to allow these people to heal is to return their belongings to them. Personally, I feel the Portrait of Wally should not have stayed at the Leopold Museum. Mr. Leopold was only thinking of himself when coming into possession of the piece. He knew the piece was stolen, and he knew Leah Bondi was the rightful owner. The fact that he couldn't put his ego aside and return a prized possession to the one it belonged to, whom had experienced the harshness of World War II, is despicable. There are still thousands of artworks out there not yet found, some buried, still being held in possession by wrongful owners, or lost forever. It is important for us to recognize the cruelty of World War II and the significance of returning Nazi-looted art to their rightful owners.